Here, let me say something before Chris starts. Chris, he's a historian, and he does a lot of work just the history of this area, and he puts a lot of things on Facebook about this area, and I kind of follow that on Facebook, and I've seen some very interesting things on there. So I talked to Chuck and Pastor Carter and Chris, and just asked him to do a presentation for us, just talking about the history of this area. Some of the stuff about the Underground Railroad and how Burlington was established and that kind of stuff. So he's going to give us a presentation talking about this area. Thought it'd be interesting for you all to hear. And the roots of this area go deep into Virginia, so I thought you'd find that interesting too.
All right, well, as Jim was telling you, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Underground Railroad and the history of the area. Incidentally, right now you're in what was once the county seat of Lawrence County. Courthouse sat right over here where the basketball court sat, and right over here behind this log cabin you'll see one of two stone jails dating pre-Civil War in the state of Ohio. So it's something that you might want to walk over and take a look at. I'm sorry? Yes, it's still there. It was built in 1852. I'm sorry, 1848.
But you ain't put nobody in there right now.
No. It's actually the second log. It's actually the second jail. The first one burnt to the ground. A man set an inmate in there charged with incest. Set a fire to so he could loosen the boards and stuff to the jail. Ended up catching the thing on fire and burned it to the ground. Incidentally, he got out. He escaped, or didn't escape, but he survived the fire, was burnt pretty severely, but ended up in Columbus in the penitentiary, and he died there of tuberculosis. Wow. But anyway, on to actually what I was here to talk about. I get off on a tangent, so just bear with me.
He takes after his daddy.
Yeah. Notice I'm not denying it.
Bill, bro. You got a bill up there? You're not Chris gets started, he won't want to stop.
That's
So I had to pull on his coattail.
That's it. Just shut up. Just tell me. Anyway, some of the things that I found out here, one of the things I wanted to point out. Now, I'm trying to relay history as accurately as possible. I have no agenda or what have you, but what I've noticed to be really important is the importance of religion and the churches in the area, and pastors, especially on the Underground Railroad. Too often, I think, personally, the religious aspect is left out of our modern history. The Underground Railroad Conductors often gave their own property to assist the runaways. So many of them, not all of them, but many of them were poor. Slaves were very expensive, equivalent of a new car today, so they weren't a cheap thing. The slave owners then were very angry at the loss of their property. You can imagine if someone stole your car, brand new car. But anyone assisting runaway slaves was subject to harassment, alienation from their neighbors and their friends, beatings, midnight raids, and dangers to their families. Legally, they faced forfeiture of their property, severe fines, and anywhere from 5 to 20 years in prison, all for someone they didn't know. As a result, conductors were really secretive, and they were a very close-knit group. Seldom kept records because they'd be used later to indict them. So it took more than a desire to right a wrong to do the things they did. It actually took a conviction. Okay, so in an attempt to be as historically accurate as possible, as I said, I have a whole lot of documents, and I'm going back and using them so as to get the facts straight. Few terms will be used that are no longer acceptable, but they were common in the period, and I just ask that you excuse their use. Anyway, and you're in Lawrence County, Ohio, and you're in Fayette Township. Now, Fayette Township was established in 1798, and it was named after the Marquis de Lafayette. So this is Fayette Township, named after Lafayette from the Revolutionary War. William Davidson was the first settler to come here, and he came here as a result of a land grant that he was given as a result of being a Revolutionary War soldier. This area is the area for the Shawnee Indian tribes. It was a hunting ground. So when they came here, they had to fight off the Indians and stuff like that. Now in 1799, Macedonia was first established, if you will. That's the first records that I have found. It's an African settlement about 4 miles out back. If you follow this road right here where your bus is parked, straight on out, you'll come into Macedonia. In the beginning, they had church, but they had it only in their homes. And in somewhere between 1811 and 1813, Macedonia Baptist Church was established as part of the Providence Association. Now, I wore my shirt here. This is Macedonia Church. Got the historical marker on the back. But anyway, it's part of the Providence Association. Now, it was the first black church west of Pennsylvania. So when we're talking way back. This is actually the first black church west of Pennsylvania. The first church was so small that it was later used as a corn crib, and the bell tower was actually made of sticks. Right after this was established, the Underground Railroad started, or that's the first records that we have of it. Now there were 3 routes to Macedonia Church, which was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and that was Charlie Creek, Macedonia Creek, and Solida Road. Right behind us here, there was this is 4-Pole Creek, and about a mile upriver is this is a 4-pole and 12 poles right up the river. There was a sandbar here, which was commonly used for runaways to cross the river. So we are in the area where they would have crossed. At the end of the block here, there is a house which has long been rumored to have been part of the Underground Railroad. I have found some sort of definitive proof, but I'm still looking for a little more. There are rumored to be tunnels under it, and I can verify that in the basement there are a group of, in the wall, the bricks are different colors from the rest of the wall. So I'm assuming that those tunnels then may have been covered up. Also, there is a hiding space underneath the house. I guess you could probably hide anywhere from 10 to 12 people in it. Now, one night while the guy who owned the house, I heard this from Susan Spencer. There was a man was up waiting on runaways to come, and he sat there with a pistol in his lap, fearing that they would be followed, which would have been common at the time. Well, they came up and they came in the house. They would leave the doors unlocked for people just to come in just as quickly as possible. They came in, they were being followed, so he jumped up and ran outside, and you have to remember this is 1700 or 1800, so it was absolute pitch black outside. A gunfight ensued. The slave catchers ran off, and the conductor went back into the house. The next morning he got up and he came outside and he found one of them dead. And there's no way to document this, but I'm just wanting to repeat this. They took him, this unidentified slave catcher, and they took him to the 37 cemetery, and he's buried there and now in an unmarked grave. Some of the people that I want to talk about, Jim Ditcher. Some of you may or may not have heard of him, but anyway, he's actually from Proctorville, about 15 miles from here. Operated all up and down through this area, all the way down to Portsmouth. He was called the Red Fox of the Underground Railroad, and has no relation to the comedian Red Fox. I actually took the time to look that up. He is credited with assisting over 300 runaways. Now, Proctorville was at the time known as Quaker's Bottom. The religion, the Quakers. It was against their religion for slavery, as I mentioned. Here, once again, we have religion popping up. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there were 3 ways to get to Macedonia Church, and all of them followed a creek. This was very important because as they were being followed and they would have their dogs out and stuff like that, Ditcher would actually follow the creek, walk through the creek so that the hounds wouldn't be able to follow the scent. He was a free mulatto, and he ended up fighting in the Civil War, and he's buried here in Lawrence County, but I haven't been able to find out where yet. One of the guys that worked right along with him was a guy by the name of Gabe Johnson. Still looking for information on him, but give me a little time and I'll find it. Another group that I want to talk about is the Campbell family. Just about 15 miles from here is a place called Ironton, Ohio. It's actually where the county seat is now. Moved from here to there. And it was founded by a guy by the name of John Campbell. Now, all these people would have worked together. And in Ironton, I have found evidence of relationship, family between John Campbell and a guy by the name of John Rankin up in Ripley, Ohio. If you're not familiar with John Rankin, he's one of the most famous Underground Railroad conductors, and he was a preacher, Presbyterian. As a matter of fact, there was a story of a girl who was running away, and she was taking with her her 2-year-old baby. It was in the middle of the winter. The Ohio River was frozen over, and someone had given her a pole to carry with her. Well, she went over and she actually fell through the ice. The pole caught, so she was able to scramble back out and carry her baby with her. Went a little further and fell through the ice again. But once again, the pole caught her and she was able to scramble back out. She made it across to Ohio at that time. A slave catcher was waiting on her and snatched her just as soon as she got out of the Ohio River. She fell to her knees in complete despair and defeat, and he said, anyone who's gone through that for their freedom deserves it, and he turned her loose. That lady, John Rankin, ended up telling a friend of his, who was also an Underground Railroad conductor, about it, and his daughter happened to be standing by. His daughter was Harriet Beecher Stowe. Yeah. The lady that I just described is the character Eliza. Okay. Now we also have another guy over here by the name of Dr. Camillus Hall. He's buried right over here in Green Lawn Cemetery. And he was also a Underground Railroad conductor. He had a problem with another doctor at the time. I'm not exactly sure what the problem was. But anyway, they started putting up little flyers about each other. They just didn't get along, and this guy's horrible and that kind of thing. And this little kid ended up saw the flyer and made a little song out of it. Well, the other doctor heard it and ended up shooting and killing the kid's dog. So I don't guess he thought it was very funny. We also have a Reverend Beeman. And at Burlington Presbyterian Church, which is right over here, there's you'll see a white building there with a blue roof. It's that right there. In 1837, the church split. There was actually a nationwide split in the Presbyterian Church, but that church here split as well. And it split over the issue of slavery. Reverend Beeman and another guy actually kicked out every slave holder or slave owner, kicked them out of the church, and they ended up going across the river to Huntington. They started another church over there. The pastor came back and forth, and incidentally, he owned a slave girl by the name of Susan, who he later led to the Lord and was baptized. But he would come back and forth. The church, the reason I'm mentioning that church over there, that church then got with some people from Guyandotte, and they decided to start a school. The school was named Mount Hebron. After a period of time, they decided that they would rename the school. Trying to figure out a new name for the school, the pastor there mentioned a friend of his that they might want to introduce or name the school after. A pretty influential friend. That friend was John Marshall, the Supreme Court of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Therefore, Marshall University's roots started right over there.